So getting back to how Mouse ruined comics.
Okay.
All right, 30 seconds. Your 30 seconds are up. No more boomer music.
Stop right there, criminal scum.
There you go.
Well, hello. Ladies, gentlemen, it's a Wednesday. It's another episode of the Mattriarchy. I am your belated host, Matt Reese, coming to you from Scottsbluff, Nebraska. And today, we are joined by our usual cast of whatever that is we are. We've got the Metal, who apparently prefers Gambit.
Yeah, that's my taste.
Yeah, there you go. And we've got Twitless.
What's up?
And we were supposed to have two other guys, including, we're both first time being on air, our show. My business partner, Barry, who I don't think he's ever been on one of my Mattriarchy shows, and Brian Brinley, who does the art for Omega Girl. So
Yep.
I have a couple of our artists, and they couldn't make it for whatever reason, or at least Brian's not here yet. So, but I know Barry couldn't make it. So that's
which is a shame. I haven't talked to Barry in a while.
Yeah. Well, hopefully, he'll be on one of these other shows coming up here. We'll see how that shakes out. So, but yeah, there you have it. That's the story. So today, it's my favorite Wolverine comic. And we have 5 comics and 3 people.
Yeah, no, that'd be great.
So yeah, we're going to do something different here. So how do we want to do that, everybody?
Probably shouldn't. Let's start. Well,
I would say start with the comics that we picked in case Brian shows up, so that we don't cover his without him.
That's probably a good idea.
I like it.
Although it's a shame because Brian's is chronologically, I think the first, which would be a great place to start, because then we could go through time. But oh well, it's all right.
So I guess we could go backwards, right?
That would be yours.
That would be mine. I think is the
or
most
is it
recent
or did Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale do theirs most recently? I don't know.
Let me look at the publication. No, that's right. Metals is first. If we go reverse. So Metal, tell us about your comic.
Okay, well, as the name on the screen shows, I prefer Gambit. Gambit's always been my favorite X-Men and Marvel character. But I do think the two of them have a really good chemistry together, because they're kind of like different sides of a similar coin. They're both kind of ruffians in their own way, sometimes playing on the outside of the law. And Wolverine is kind of more of the beast within a person, right? Like the animal within a man. While Gambit, while low class, is more of a man of class, right? He shows like kind of the problems of when you play on the other side of the law within civilized society. And this comic has both of them running around in London because somebody the Gambit was connected to got murdered, and there was a string of murders with young women going on. So it's like there's a new Jack the Ripper running around, and all the signs are pointing to Wolverine being the Ripper, and they have to butt heads real quickly, but they realize it's a setup. And they try to get out of there, but then the person who helps them out is part of the setup, and they have to work together while dealing with mind games from a telepath, because they were actually set up by Arcade the entire time.
Yeah. And that is we specifically read the second issue of this 4-issue miniseries.
Yes.
And the crazy thing now, when I was reading this, I was really digging on. Well, first of all, I want to back up a little bit and talk about my feelings about Wolverine and Gambit. I have, for the better part of a decade, maybe almost 20 years, been of the opinion that Gambit's a good character and Wolverine is a good character, but they're really, in terms of team dynamics, exactly the same guy.
Yeah. So they're kind of like two sides of the same coin. They're just like operating in different spaces usually.
Well, I mean, like in a lot of ways, the way you were describing it, I got thinking about it, and really, Gambit is the city mouse, and Wolverine is the country mouse, right? So Gambit's native environment is well, it's New Orleans, but it's any urban environment is where Gambit is like his whole like
anywhere where there's like a back alley,
and Wolverine is a redneck, you know.
He's the paradoxical spec ops for Canada. Just the funniest image. There's no offense to our Canadian friends.
Well, yeah, definitely. And all online of that in the first X-Men movie when they've done the X-ray on Wolverine and they're like experimentation on mutants. Who could have done this? Every time I see that movie, my brain says it must be the work of Canada.
So I think a funny thing too is while they're very, very similar characters, right? Like they're kind of playing in the same archetype. Really, they can't stand each other, like almost ever. They really don't get along, and I always assumed, though it never really came very clear in the writing, but almost from like a psychology thing, I assumed they didn't get along because they saw the things they didn't like about themselves in each other, and so really they were butting heads with themselves anytime they were butting heads with each other.
No, I think that's really fair. I think that's really fair. Yeah. I can definitely see that being a primary thing there. But Twitless, what was your thought about this particular comic?
So I read the series.
Lucky.
So here's my thing. I have mixed feelings on this one. This is a combination of Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. And anyone who knows Tim Sale, he's responsible for Batman: The Long Halloween, and his style is marked by his moodiness. No, how do I put this? His ability to wield mood very effectively.
I really like the art here. Like, this is my cup of tea.
Mood and color are two high marks there. I felt like I was not in love with how he portrayed Gambit. Gambit ended up looking like too much like Eddie Campbell would draw him, I think. But there is a quality to Tim Sale's work. I think Tim Sale does his best work when he's working with a character like Batman, just the sort of like noir aspects he's able to pull. And he's kind of doing some of that here. But like Tim Sale's a great artist, and his ability again to like set a scene, to set a mood and a tone. I think Sale does a really good setting. And so for this particular work, there's this you can even see it on the images here. He's wielding blue very effectively to kind of create this kind of a wet, aquatic kind of a tone, but that's also impacting the fact that these are two characters who are dealing with death of loved ones. So the technical aspects are synchronizing with the thematic content, and that's also really, really, really good. My issue with this story is let me see. I'm actually going to scroll a little bit. I think it's in this particular issue. Yeah, here we go. I think my issue with this series is more Loeb's problem, I think, because it's the writing that I have some problems with.
Yeah.
The impression I get from Loeb is that he's a writer who takes his idea of a concept and then doesn't care about existing lore or doing his homework as well as he should. This is anyone who read the Ultimates and the Ultimate line of comics would know how Loeb handled the Ultimatum event and how he just kind of did whatever he wanted and didn't really pay that much attention to what came before. And there are some comic book writers who are guilty of this. There are some comic book writers, in contrast, who will get an assignment and then they pull out all the back issues, they pull out the Marvel Encyclopedia or DC, guides, and they research. Okay, here's what this character is. Here's what this character has done in the past. Here's what their capabilities are. And if I want to riff on that or change that, I do need to at least be cognizant of what's come before. And there are some writers who, depending on the project, will just be like, here's what I want to do with these characters. I have a rough idea who they are, and I ain't doing the homework. I feel like Loeb falls into the latter category. And so there's just things that just like, they just don't fit. And in terms of these characters, I think in their moral personalities. And then on top of that, there's just some sloppy sequential art storytelling in some places. So a couple of examples is one right here, or this is a borderline case, right? We could probably debate this one, but they're getting away in this getaway scene, and Gambit's like flipping cars, and it's like, okay, well, in superhero parlance, flipping a car, as long as you don't see somebody dying, is kind of, superheroes can kind of get away with that because it's like bloodless mayhem. But like a scene later, yeah, it's like a panel later, Wolverine pops the tires on a double-decker bus. So the reason why you can get away with it with cars, especially if they're cop cars, is that they're, there's usually some sort of like misunderstanding, and you didn't really hurt the cops. They've got some cuts and bruises in your mind. You didn't show them like actually dying, which they probably.
And this is also like after the 80s, so like every car is a glorified roll cage anyway.
Yeah, so like you sort of get away with it. But here's the side of it: you're not supposed to do this. You can do it to cop cars because they are actively engaged with you in the action scene.
Not supposed to do it to civilians.
You're not supposed to take a civilian double-decker bus that has a bunch of like probably kids and mothers in it and then like tip the bus over and be like, yeah, it's fine. And I'm sitting there going like, so Tim Sale is able to look at this, look at again the blue tone that we're working with here, and it's playing off of Wolverine's coloring scheme. Tim Sale is a great colorist. We need Matt C here to comment on this. I think that'd be a great insight. He'd be able to use the correct vocabulary to talk about more what's going on here. But that being said, like Tim Sale is doing great work on this spread here, but Wolverine is literally like, this is not a superhero. Like, I'm sorry, like you don't do this to civilian vehicles.
He flipped it over real gentle like.
Yeah. Okay, so Captain Cummings says if Gambit flipped a car, then everyone died.
Yeah, I mean that's probably true. I mean, the way he's supposed to like supercharge the kinetics within matter, it's basically like mini atomic bursts going off. Like most of what he does would just kill people.
Right, and that's why it's like it's superhero physics, and that's why there's this weird line that you walk, right? And so like cop cars are chasing you. We flipped the cop cars, but they're fine. Like that's something that superhero readers are totally okay with. That's part of the suspension of disbelief that superhero readers are accustomed to doing. But this scene right here, again, this is where I'm like, I think Loeb's just being sloppy. I'm like, this crosses the line. You don't slice public transportation buses and flip them over. Like there's like a woman with a baby carriage who's got, you know what I mean? Like that's where my brain goes. So there's little stuff like that, but there's also moments because the scene terminates with them just doing this kind of James Bondish kind of a plunge into the river. I don't know if it's the Thames.
Yeah.
Is the Thames right? Would it be the
Yeah.
Thames? But then like a scene later, they're just like somewhere else. And having read the entire miniseries, again, there's just kind of some sloppy storytelling. They never explain how they get from point A to point B a couple of times. And so you end up just having to go, I guess this is just chalked up to some psychic shenanigans, but that was never actually spelled out exactly where the psychic shenanigans were ending and where the real stuff was happening.
That's exactly like I was reading through this, and of course, like I waited till the very last minute to finish these, right? So
reading that homework on the bus.
I reread the
homework on the bus, literally, and somebody
the bus that got flipped.
over.
Yeah, this bus that got flipped over. Okay.
So that was my problem. But no, I was sitting there and I was like, what the heck? I don't understand anything happening here. Yeah. And then I'm flipping up and flipping down, and I'm like, yeah, okay. I thought maybe I had missed a page when I made the PDF.
Nope, you didn't.
And I'm like, good God, what's wrong with me? So I'm like, okay, no, this is how it's supposed to be. I guess I just roll with it, and maybe I'll complain about it on stream. And then when they did the reveal at the end of the episode, and it's like, oh, it's arcade. Oh, okay. Yeah, it's supposed to be nonsense. And then I went back and reread that next scene, and they were like, do you know where we are? No, okay, so they're as confused as I am. Oh, all right.
Yeah, but they never did an acceptable job, I think, of selling me on
when the game began.
There are certain moments where it's like, even if you have a lady mastermind who's kind of doing some illusion stuff, and you have Arcade who also kind of does tricks. So you have two tricksy people, a line of like, because like these were two characters who were in a car, and the car went underwater, and now they're dry. and in a different location. Like we're
And
missing here. Like,
and in a subterranean tunnel.
right?
With a
Yeah.
dead woman.
It's like one of those grindhouse movies. They're like, just like the reels are missing. And it's like
It's almost like being in a dream, right? Like how you'll be in one scene in a dream and automatically, without even a proper transition, you're just in another part of a dream.
But if they'd sold me better on that, and like later on and shown that Lady Mastermind was in fact doing that to them, it would have made more sense. But she actually, the car chase, from what I understand, was real.
Yeah, that part seems real. Yeah,
because later on they're talking to the police guy, who's also real. So like I said, there's something missing in
the bigger part is I think if you're trying to give it any charity, which it is charity, because I agree with you on most of this. If you're trying to give it any charity, you could argue that it began the second she pulled up in the car, and even some of the whole like bus stuff and all that didn't actually happen because they were already in the game.
See, I would totally accept that. I need there to be in the story an acknowledgement of that.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Or a hint of it. That would have helped a lot.
Like if it was a coloring issue, like they changed the palette.
Yeah, and then later on show that when she's messing.
But
with
they
them,
didn't. The palette's consistent through the whole thing. Where it's...
So I fault. I'm going to fault Loeb for that. Again, you never know with a comic book exactly where the fault lies for something. But like I said, my inclination is to go with Loeb on that because the Long Halloween is a pretty tightly constructed story, and
yeah, for all we know, it could have been like he wanted it to be longer, and there's like you have to cut some pages out of this.
I'm gonna blame Mark Powers.
Oh, the editor.
Yeah,
yeah. I usually side on the editor for most things because he could have also been like, "You need to change things. This doesn't make sense."
Yeah.
Could be, yeah, because Loeb did do a Long Halloween as well, so this is another pair up for them. So like I said, there are elements that I like. Oh gosh, Marm's trying to get us to do some hot takes. We're gonna get to some of the Japan stuff in a bit.
That's true.
That's coming up.
Hey, Marv, if you feel like getting online on stream and debating the Japanization of Wolverine, feel free to holler at me and I'll shoot you the link.
Come in as a filler and talk about comics that you haven't had a chance.
Yeah, exactly.
To
read.
Yeah. Because we've got. Oh, he's working on art tonight, so okay.
Well, Red is here. Have you read either any of these comics? Wolverine Gambit Victims, the original miniseries by Frank Miller, and random scattered issues of through the 90s and 2000s.
We had some cancels, so you could use some ringers if you want.
So if you've read those and you remember them, you can hop on and tell us what you think. But I
should have put the comics in the description when I put the video together. That wasn't thinking on my part.
Yeah.
Oh well.
But it's funny about the Japanese thing. We get it because we will be getting to it. If you Twitless, you read the miniseries like I did. And you notice that there's like this weird grouping of a lot of the picked comics, right? By accident, as Reese and I were talking about before. Because this has some flashbacks for them, or not really flashbacks, but kind of like a parallel telepathic dream, as if they were still in the case with the women that they've lost. And for Wolverine, in the next issue, it actually does show him with like Mariko in Japan. Yeah.
And the other nice bit of crossover is one of the other comics that Brian selected for us was the Frank Miller miniseries, which has Yukio, or Yukio, and she's in this one, and she's in that original miniseries as well. So so there's she got to be a crossover character there as well. So there's definitely
an appearance kind of the flashback of why Gambit knew the cop in the first place that ended up getting killed, and then Yukio was trying to pin a robbery on him, so then he ended up throwing her under the bus afterwards to get out of it.
Oh, but yeah, I'll definitely have to read the whole miniseries. I did grab it, but I hadn't had a chance to read it yet. So
yeah, so as a
blazed through this issue, so that's actually sounds really interesting. So
yeah, there were definitely things I liked about this book, miniseries. I like I said, Tim Sale's good artist. Although I will say, I think he he and Miller both find places to almost, I would say, Batmanize Wolverine a couple times. You can see that on the panel, that the top panel we have displayed, where Wolverine's fins are about as Batman-esque as you could make them. But so there's that. But the fact that it's a team up book, not just Wolverine going solo. It's a duo. And I like that. The X-Men, there's a lot of good storytelling you can tell when you team them up in pairs, as opposed to just having them all just splayed across the page.
You really don't get to explore the characters in depth when you do that.
Yeah,
it's harder. Yeah, I think Claremont was able to juggle it because he's he would just cram the page with words. But
one of the other things that's interesting about this particular pairing too is that both of them, Wolverine and Gambit, and this is one reason why, like I said, on a team, I think they're both kind of wasted space to have them both on there. But it's interesting to see their interaction, because these guys are two men that both believe they're the best they are at what they do.
Yeah.
Right. And that's only Wolverine says it out loud, and Gambit would be insulted if you made him say it.
I think, honestly, I will say the big difference is they're both hard men, but they're hard in different ways. Gambit is a hardened thief, and Wolverine is a hardened killer. And there is a difference between those two things. And that does allow for Gambit to, I think, bounce off of Wolverine a couple times here. Because Gambit, from most of what he does is he steals stuff, and he's partly in it because, like, for the thrill of the chase. It's not even that he's like, I think that addicted to crime. In fact, sometimes he steals.
No, he's a gamesman.
He steals things that are stolen from evil people just so he can experience the thrill of stealing. But he's not an assassin.
That's the same reason why he hustles people. He doesn't need their money. He just likes the game.
Yeah, I think that's a good observation.
So Well Red says Wolverine is tortured. He has motivations. Well Red's really a big fan of motivations. That's an inside joke there. It's always asking us about the motivations for books when we read stuff.
Well, and I think definitely Wolverine has lots of motivations. I think Wolverine is a great study into the nature of the savage side of masculinity, where the beast aspect of Wolverine is, and this is one of the things that I in the story.
Why does it make any sense that he's Canadian? Because if you ever meet a Canadian,
it does though. If you've ever met a Canadian that's not from a city, then you get it, because I mean they're like you've got to be a hard man of the land, mountain.
Yeah,
man.
I've seen Canadians be like, they see a moose outside and they go, "No, you need to go away. I got to go to work, man."
Well, it's like, have you ever seen the show Letterkenny? Letterkenny is such a funny show.
Yeah,
but one of the running jokes, right, is that they could go for a scrap.
Well, there's that, but it's so low key, and then it's like, "Hey, you want cheese afterwards?"
There's a lot of hockey players in Canada.
Oh,
that's fair. That's where they got it from. They're like, "Oh, those hockey players are always knocking teeth out. Let's make Wolverine Canadian." I think it was mostly because it's like up north, and they wanted to make him wanted to tie him to northern stuff.
So
yeah.
But yeah, anyway, and that's why that's the thing is, like, so you've got that real the savage aspect that is part of manhood, but he's also tries to temper it, and there are reasons for his tempering. But I think that there are with Gambit, if he's well written, because he's not always well written, and I think he's a hard guy to get right. He's also there. There is the idea of self-ownership. There is the idea of are you what? Gambit's somebody who's always trying to not be part of the system.
Here's my problem with Wolverine. I feel like Wolverine is stuck in constantly reliving the same exact story arc. Everyone who gets Wolverine is like, "Oh, he's a tortured man. He's got to learn to not be an animal." And it's like, cool. And then like Claremont will have him like do that arc, and then everyone else just picks him up and goes, "You know what I'm going to do with this character? I'm going to have him go through the exact same character arc."
Gambit, I feel like you have more freedom with storytelling when you do stuff with him, because you could place him in any city, and his story is different depending on the city he's in, right? Being a man of like the back alleys, he kind of reflects the place that he's in to some degree because he has to adapt to it.
We got lumberjack jokes in chat.
Yeah, that's fair.
Ladies and gentlemen. But
Wolverine is Peter Parker with more miles. I think that's so. Taylor says Wolverine is Peter Parker. I said with a lot more miles. If you know you're dealing with the death of everyone you've ever known. So.
He's kind of like that old beat up car that they keep trying to sell you at the used car lot, but nobody really wants.
So, yeah,
this stream is called My Favorite Wolverine Comic, ladies and gentlemen. We're comparing Wolverine to a beaten up jalopy.
No, I actually think that's fair.
I think he's more like an Oldsmobile, but
well, really? An Oldsmobile?
Yeah.
I knew a thing or two about Oldsmobiles.
Yeah.
Okay, he's gonna. Before I start singing car songs, let's move on to the next. Have we said everything we have to say about this comic?
Well, Red is calling us out. What about Love-Stricken Samurai Wolverine? What about Mindless Frankenstein Weapon X? We're going to touch on some of those, but I would say that they all end up kind of touching on the same idea, which is
Mindless Frankenstein Weapon X is same as Bestial Wolverine,
which is very similar to the Ronin persona. They're all very tied to the sort of like tortured violence. So
because the thing about the Love-Strick the Love-Strick Samurai Wolverine, and we'll probably get to that later, but I guess we'll just go ahead and address it right now, is that represents the need to temper the animalistic and violent impulses of manhood towards something important and greater. So the idea that you can be protector or you can be predator, and that's that aspect in it.
Poor Spirit Barbers got too old for this crap. No, here's another thing. I will make a slight. I'm not gonna. Tim Sale's a great artist. That's great. I am gonna call him out a little bit for leaning way too heavily into the Batman thing here, because it's like, okay, that's just Talia al Ghul, and then you didn't really want to draw Arcade, so you just drew Two-Face instead. With a little bit of Scarface, the puppet.
Yeah, I was curious about. I didn't know if I had not seen a story where Arcade had been scarred, so I didn't know what to make of that. But that was.
I think that might be. It may be in canon. I'm not certain, but either way,
they did bring up a possible event that happened, but I don't remember the actual story that they're talking about. If it did.
That being said, this is just Tim Sale drawing Batman characters as. Marvel characters. So I am just slight call out there, just a little.
Even before he was drawing Batman characters, they did before they did the Batman books, Loeb and Sale did Daredevil Yellow. So that's still inside of that Batman wheelhouse. So
all right, so like I said, we're still channeling the Batman here, but like I was like, okay, these are very recognizably Batman characters. Very much so.
I'm not familiar enough with Mastermind to know if Mastermind and Talia look just too close to make a difference there.
I mean, I'm being a little memery on that side. But it's mostly her tech outfit. I think it's the outfit mostly. But I mean, I think that whether or not that one is fair, the Two-Face Arcade is really on the nose there. So let's see. Also, I
don't really have anything else to say on this.
I called it as Arcade at the end of issue 1. I was like, this sounds like Arcade. This whole story, this has got to be an Arcade thing.
Yeah.
So,
but to me, it was just like I enjoy the 4-part miniseries. It's probably as far as Wolverine comics go, it is my favorite dynamic because it does kind of have like that country mouse, city mouse thing, and they are very similar characters, but they're different enough that they butt heads well. And it was just kind of like a fun little romp, even despite some of the sequential problems in the story.
Sure. No, I don't think it ever goes so far to like ruin it. I just think that it were things where I was like, all right, come on. Maybe that's just the size of the 4-issue miniseries. I don't know, but there were some weaknesses. I think when it comes to characterization, I will say that apart from the out of character slashing of the tires of the the double-decker bus, which is a
You're
problem.
just on the bus.
Aside from that, I think the characters were written in character, and that is something that we have to now we have to mention because of the amount of times that writers will write characters so far out of character that I think it deserves to be highlighted. Where it was like, you know what, that felt like Wolverine. That was recognizable Wolverine. Gambit was written in character. Arcade was, a murderous psychopath.
Doing arcade things.
Yeah, we're all on brand, and that is I know, and it's such a low bar, but this book definitely hit it, so it's fair to mention.
Yeah, this was a competent comic, and I appreciated that.
Exactly. Yeah. So, all right. So, are we doing Reese's next then?
Yeah, if we're continuing to go backwards.
Yeah, if we do the backwards in time thing.
So let's do Reese's next. I'll pull up some reference images. Tell us why you picked this one.
Okay, so my original Reese looks different. I'm scared. Yeah, I did a little trim on the old facial hair.
You got rid of the Jesus beard.
Sorry to terrify you with my enormous nose.
Did a trim. You're wearing a hat when you normally don't, and you're in a different office place.
I am
like everything's different about
everything
your
is
screen.
different. Well, yeah, that's true. Sorry. So the one I picked, it's Chasers. And it's not the one I was originally going to pick. The one I was originally going to pick is a 5-part called The Cry of the Coyote. But I looked at what I had to do with in my life, and I knew I'd never get it read. So I picked this was a second pick, and they were both from the early 2000s. When I was picking up Wolverine on the monthly. The Cry of the Coyote was a story of people smuggling illegal aliens from across the border from Mexico, and a basically slave trading ring that was going on, and it was and it really stuck with me about the whole story. But I knew I wasn't gonna have a chance to read it, so this is my second pick. And part of it is this is the reason I picked it up is because I just loved the environment that it takes place in, and I loved like the just the kind of the feel for it, the aesthetic.
Mm-hmm.
And the story is Wolverine walks into a bar, and people are swapping stories. These thugs are swapping stories, and Wolverine interjects himself. So it's like the same framing of story as the Batman Nobody Knows from the 1970s, which is where a bunch of kids are on a campfire are telling urban legends about Batman, and then Batman shows up.
Yeah.
But in that one, it's a real feel-good story. This is the total inversion of that.
Yeah. This is an interesting one.
So, what happens is so there's these Wolverine walks into a bar, he's getting himself a drink, and these thugs are all telling stories about the different people they know in organized crime and the different violent things that they've been a party to or that they've been witness to. And so it's got a same kind of it has a similar feel. A lot of the story has a similar feel to a Tarantino film. I've got a real fondness for Reservoir Dogs. And so this had some of those. Dogs. What?
I love Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah, isn't it great? And so this had a lot of the same kind of a feel to it. And so I love that kind of crime picture. And so this is one of the things that stuck out to me through the years after going back after I read it again. And so it turns out to risk spoiling the story that Wolverine is tracking down these 3 guys at the bar because they were, basically because they kidnapped a girl over a debt that her father had to them. They were basically being loan sharks. So that's the setup. But I picked it is because I thought it was just I love that quintessential, crime story kind of feel. So
yeah, you picked a great Punisher story.
Yeah.
That's what I thought the whole time. Like, I enjoyed the story. It just didn't necessarily feel like it should have been a Wolverine story.
Oh, I definitely can see what you say about it being a Punisher story, but the thing is I don't think Wolverine wouldn't have been involved in a thing
So
like this.
I think you're right and wrong.
Okay.
that is the complicated thing about that. I think you are right on some level. I also think you are wrong on another level, and that actually gets to the heart of one of my problems with Wolverine in a narratological sense overall. So this is like a whole bucket of worms. But before we get to that bucket of worms, I want to comment that this story has in terms of just as a story, I was iffy on this one at first, because it is a lot of talking. And I was like, where is this going? This is one of those types of stories where it's and that's okay. Like I said, it's okay for a story to kind of like put you in that spot where you're like, where are we going with this? I'm not so certain. What's important when you do that, when you string along a reader, is that the payoff is strong. I would say that in terms of like how the story is paced, the payoff is pretty strong. Wolverine saves a scared, frightened little girl from 3 monstrous
I really
people.
like the joke at the end.
But yeah, so so like that aspect of it is strong, but you have to stick with it to the end. If you quit before the end, you're not going to get that payoff. So it's one of those types of stories. So I do want to point that out, is that it's that type of story, and I do think that. Because I remember halfway through, I was like, why did Reese pick this? This is kind of, I don't like this. And then like it ramps up so much at the end that I was like, all right, I can see why. You know, like that payoff was made pretty well. So like I said, structurally speaking, that was my narrative journey through just the story as a story.
Yeah. What were your thoughts, Metal?
Well, I didn't want to say this earlier, because of all the joking, but the actual answer to the whole Wolverine Peter Parker thing is that Wolverine is Peter Parker if he wasn't a sissy. Which is a joke at the end that
Fair enough.
I enjoyed it. It did very much give me that Tarantino, or even that like pre-Tarantino kind of like Hong Kong crime film stuff that really inspired him to do the things that he did. I thought it was very funny. It was comedic in a dark way, but the actual punchline to it was pretty bright, because the punchline is this comedic irony that Wolverine is the karma, so to speak, of what these guys did, and he does end up saving the girl. So yeah, structurally, I like it a lot. But this is also like what I agree narratively is I could see Wolverine being this situation, especially because he's kind of been turned into an honest mercenary. I guess it's like the evolution of his character, and I'm not sure if that should have been the evolution of his character.
And that is my point, and that is exactly my point.
So many other Marvel characters that they already have by this point that fills that role, but they decided to write Wolverine.
And that is my second point. Yes, thank you for making my points for me. So the thing is that Reese, you're right. In a sense, this is Wolverine, but I would say this is almost what I would say a bastardization of what Wolverine was supposed to be when we read the Frank Miller miniseries. Because the point was that under the tutelage and experiences of the X-Men and his working with Charles Xavier and not just them, but Storm and the rest of the team, that he was supposed to become less like the Punisher. And there are several points in, and I took special note of them. There are very specific points in the Frank Miller series where Wolverine is not killing the killers, and he's leaving them alive, and they are assassins sent to kill him. And so it's not that Wolverine is completely above taking a life, but the fact that he's supposed to be becoming more. The point of his arc of his character, at least in terms of the X-Men, at least the way that I think Claremont and other people have envisioned it, and this is where I think I like Wolverine's original character arc trajectory, was the fact that he was supposed to be becoming less of a killer as he went along.
He kind of actually becomes more meek by definition. Because meekness is a creature that chooses not to bear its fangs.
Yeah, got power under control. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
here he's disemboweling some guys. And I'm like,
Right.
that's a very Punisher type move. I'm not saying Wolverine would never have done something like that, but I'm like, it is to me very tragic to see that creators going down that route when there was a different path that I liked a lot better that Claremont and others laid out for him. So like I said, that's where I feel like you're right and wrong. It's like, I guess, or you're right, but the whole situation is wrong. I don't know.
Yeah, and I definitely can see where you're coming from on that. But with this story specifically, right? Like he's not hunting. I mean, he's hunted down these people, right? In terms of like finding them. But like
He did not have to disembowel them. He has so many tools at his disposal, including the ability to simply headbutt all of them in the room.
Okay. You could headbutt all of them in the room, definitely.
Or just punch them. He has adamantium bones. Like he just literally just punches them and they go flying. That's it. It's all he has to do.
But what I'm saying is that like, although the situation at the end of the comic is one in which he orchestrated, he still didn't make the first move.
I mean, that's just Greedo. I get the Greedo shot first thing.
Yeah.
And it may morally justify him. But again, go back to the Frank Miller thing. There are ninjas who are making the first move and they are stabbing him with swords. And at the end of it, he's like, they're still alive. They're lucky. And it's like, that's the Wolverine that I was starting to love, which is the guy who's like, I totally could have killed you, but I just cut you instead. And it's like, but I didn't disembowel you. And he did this when there were women's lives at stake. So like, again, I feel like this is a de-evolution of the character in a sense and his arc. And I think there's something about the 2000s and the 90s and 2000s that really got very comfortable with the Punisherization of certain characters. And Wolverine is one of those. And I'm not a huge fan of it.
Well, I think it's even worse too,
tell.
Right? Judging by the timeline, it's even less than like a de-evolution. It's it's kind of like a not caring about the character, because you could probably find comics at the same time. I just can't think of one off the top of my head where he did act differently. This is where we're starting to see that point in time where you're having multiple versions of a character, like multiple personalities of them show up in different comics without them being in multiverse. Like it's the same character, they're just acting different ways,
right?
Because maybe the artists aren't doing their homework or anything.
Right.
Like
if he's an X-Men, he's going to be more restrained. If he's in his own solo book, he's gutting people, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I can see that. But once again, I first of all, I like the story, and I totally see where you're coming from with all of that. But these guys had it coming.
They did have it coming. I don't disagree with that.
So I can't feel bad about Wolverine, in self-defense, killing some guys that deserve killing.
It's harder though, because you
Well,
yes,
it's like if you look at it like
yes and no. Like the part of the problem is that when you have the faceless hand ninjas, they have very little personality. They have masks over their faces. They might as well be Foot Clan robots from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, and they basically just say "Die, enemy of the hand." Here,
and they're also practically zombies. So there's that.
Yeah,
too.
well, exactly. But let me explain why this story is different. This story is 20-something pages of you getting to know these guys, and up until like basically the turn of the story, which is, you're bad people, and really I would say up until the point where you see the little girl, these are just guys in a bar, and you've gotten to know them a little bit, and they're kind of just jerks, but one of them is just trying to tell a story, and you start to empathize a little bit with them, because because as humans they have like personalities, and they have you can see that there's more to them than that. So they had it coming. It's harder to sell me on that when I've started to get to know them, and on some level, just even on the readers, just the readerly level of these are human beings who are having a conversation, and that's why it's important in a lot of fiction when you want to have your stormtroopers. That's why the stormtroopers very rarely have any conversations apart from take him to the cell. What did you see that? Click. And like that's the reason why you can kill them and never feel bad about it and never feel any amount of empathy is because they are basically faceless ciphers that have been dehumanized. And this story humanizes the villains and then disembowels them and then says, well, they kidnapped a girl. So like I said, there's a little bit of conflicting emotion going on there, regardless of the fact that the story is I will admit the story effectively sets up the idea that they have it coming in a sense, but that has to work against the fact that I've spent 20 pages with these characters being humanized. And
this is why I think I would like it better as a Punisher comic. And actually, I can tell you the other reason. I have a different reason why. Because like I said, I like the setup. I like the payoff. I think it's a good structure to basically a dark joke.
Yeah.
But if it was Punisher, with the limitations of what he can do as a human, right? He's a very, very talented human, but still a normal human that can die. I could see him needing to possibly go all out on a group of people and disembowel them and do whatever he needed to do. Because it also doesn't die in the process. Wolverine, on the other hand, could spend all the time he wants by this point in his evolution. All the time he wants. Just casually knocking these guys out, even if they shoot him or whatever.
He could have just brought a roll of duct tape and just let them shoot him. The thing is that with Punisher is a killer. That's his whole ethos. So if he does it, I'm not surprised. In fact, I'm weirded out if he doesn't sometimes. That's the point of the Punisher. It just feels weird to have Wolverine do it. Even though I wasn't completely like, oh, this is so out of character. I was like, kind of, sort of. I don't like it.
Here's my counterpoint. Sure. Here's my counterpoint to both things.
Mm-hmm.
He does spend, well, not really so much. So much with what Metal said, but the thing is you spend 20 pages getting to know these guys.
Yeah.
But what you find out about these guys is that they are violent men who glorify other violent men for their violence and like over the top. Like, I'm really glad to tell you the story about this guy that destroyed this other man's person after fornicating with his wife and like you get to know that these guys are not, they're people just like us who are terrible just like us.
Right, but then they all get gutted.
Yeah, I don't have any moral qualms that
See, but here's the thing: the fat guy
deserves death.
the fat guy, like, I actually empathize a little bit with him. He's like, wow, that was like unreasonable. Like they're not completely like, oh, we love being evil. Like they're way more normal. And I get your point from a sort of like Christian theological point.
Not even that. I mean, that's
if you put the wages of sin is death at the end, I would have laughed a lot. But
yeah, but that's part of the deal, is that it's not just that. Like, I mean, that's the fundamental underlying ethos of every gangster picture, right? Is that bad people do bad things sometimes for bad reasons. So it goes all the way back to I mean, granted, most gangster pictures are morality plays at the end of it anyway, but
yeah.
Well, a lot of gangster movies end up being morality quagmires, and that's where we started to go. This was around The Sopranos came out, right? Someone watched an episode of The Sopranos, and that's what happened here. Okay. Yeah. Someone watched an episode of The Sopranos and decided to write
Reservoir Dogs. I mean, this actually may predate The Sopranos. I'm not sure, but I mean, it's in that time frame.
Yeah.
I think this was 2003.
When's The Sopranos?
It's 2002, November 2002.
Well, that would have been, if this is 2003 and that's 2002. Then I'm gonna put my money on Sopranos.
No, this is 2002. I'm not sure when The Sopranos came out.
1999.
So
Sopranos was 1990. Yeah, this is Sopranos.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where I'm putting my money on. I know some of the creators. It was Ethan Van Sciver. He just loves Tony Soprano. A bunch of people in Jersey and New York they all wanted to be Tony. So yeah, someone watched The Sopranos and was like, we're just gonna put that in her comic, which is totally fine. People do that all the time. Was it in Claremont's day? They watched the Avengers, and not the actual Avengers, but the one with
the couple.
Yeah,
that's a good show.
The actual Avengers.
The British ones.
I think they may have predated the comic Avengers by a year.
Oh, I don't know the exact data. I just know that the Hellfire Club is just ripped straight out of an episode.
Well, and the Hellfire Club itself actually exists. There's a real thing that exists.
Sure, I'm just saying that, like,
it was a Victorian sex cult.
Literally, just the characters and how they're dressed up. It was just like, oh, someone watched that episode and said, "I am drawing that."
They took the cleaner version of the club from the Avengers.
But no, okay. So so this is, like I said, this
we'll
book
talk
definitely
about the Hellfire Club slightly in another one.
That's true. It does come up in another comic.
This book definitely brings up some. It's a very interesting discussion, is what I'll say. So I'm glad we read it, just because it prompted that talk, because I think Wolverine is a character. Metal and I were talking about this before the show. Wolverine is a character that I think has suffered from both, I think, Flanderization, where elements of his character get super concentrated over time, and he loses some of the complexity of some aspects of his character arc. He's also been subject to a fair bit of power creep. So when he first was a part of the X-Men, because the X-Men's a team book, they're supposed to be like, a team, and that means they're supposed to have unique strengths and weaknesses. You're not supposed to have somebody who's just like, can tank everything. And so Wolverine had a healing factor, but it was demonstrably demonstrated multiple times, at least in Claremont's run, how Wolverine was in mortal danger many times, because if you push that healing factor past what it could bear, or you simply just atomized him, which happened in Days of Future Past, he ain't coming back from that. So fast forward to not in Days of Future Past, he didn't. But in fast forward to today, and you can, depending on the storyline, you can cut off his head. You can do just about anything to the guy, and he'll come back from it.
You could punch him with the strength of an exploding star, and he still doesn't die.
Yeah. So that regeneration factor got, I think, a bit overclocked, a bit overtuned.
Well, and I think it was actually in Secret Wars where he reassembled himself from atoms, but that's also...
No, Dr. Doom did that. I don't think Wolverine did not do that in Secret Wars. Not Secret Wars 1. Did he do something like that in Secret Wars 2? I just read Secret Wars.
I read in the comic. It was in like essay.
Okay.
The thing now, because that
would be a situation too where
is just around his skeleton. So there are some of his cells inside the skeleton. They made it like, well, adamantium's stronger than it used to be. It could withstand impacts from like Thor hitting him as hard as he wants with his hammer. So even if he were to like atomize the rest of his body, the skeleton's still there, and then he'll slowly regenerate through it somehow. Whatever.
Hiroshi says, I only heard Flanderization for the first time earlier today, and man, that happens to everything nowadays. It's a storytelling thing. It's not always, I think, some people, I think, over complain about it. I try to be less of judgmental, but it is a thing that happens. And I think that if you're not careful, it can lead to what I think has happened to Wolverine sometimes, where his character gets kind of stuck on certain things. One of the beautiful parts about the comic we'll get to a little bit later is the fact that when Wolverine was a more nascent idea, and the lines of his character had not been so cleanly demarcated, creators felt like Chris Claremont felt like he could marry him off, give him a little bit of at least potential, or temporary happiness by marrying him off to a girl in Japan and dressing them up in traditional Japanese garb. This is the type of thing we wouldn't really see today. And because I think Wolverine has been very, people have kind of figured out what they want to do with him. And a lot of it just tends to circle around. He's a beast man. He's a beast man. He's a beast man. That's when I think the Flanderization thing can be very negative, if it starts to pigeonhole a character. All right, so do we have any concluding thoughts regarding this wonderful Punisher story.
I still enjoyed it. I thought it was a good comic overall.
Yeah. Like I said, I'd stick to it to the end, but the turn there definitely
So the fact that he called Spider-Man a sissy just made it all up for me by the end, you know.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah.
Also, I'll be right back. It'll only give me a minute.
Okay.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this one.
Well, obviously you picked it.
Oh yeah, no, it's like it's great. It's great. No, I do. I guess we're killing. I do see what you're saying on it. I just think one of the situations you come to is that I feel on it is just that like not all situations are the same, and you know this is a situation where those guys aren't going to go down without a fight. And you got a guy with claws. That's his.
I get it. I'm just saying that, like, we've seen him in his early history use those claws differently.
No, yeah, I know. You're right.
In the same exact situations. And so I think that, like I said, it takes his character in this. It's almost a regression.
Yeah, but these guys aren't just hired guns in this situation. They're the instigators.
I get it, but the hand he did Wolverine. Again, in a story we will take a look at, he handles the hand with softer gloves, and you can't tell me that the hand deserve more mercy than these guys. There's just no way.
Well, see, I only read the first issue because that's the one that was specified, and I don't think the hand even show up in the first issue. Not just the fight with their dad, the dad-in-law.
Okay, all right. So yeah,
I can't even comment on that.
So it's like the first panel of the second issue there, and it's like hand. They're all over it for the rest of the miniseries.
Taylor, the subject is I don't think you could hate them anymore. I don't understand how Twitless can be just like, but they're human, dude. These guys deserve the chair. Not even a question.
So what I'm saying is
lethal injection takes too long.
What I'm saying is that if you're going to humanize the villains and if the Punisher kills him at the end, I get it. It's on brand. If Wolverine kills them, I feel conflicted about it. If Wolverine had said, hey, these guys, left them for the cops and maybe he even cut them up a bit, but they were still breathing. It was like, all right, justice has been done. Wolverine held himself back enough, and he's supposed to be on that longer trajectory of becoming less of a killer.
Here's the thing on it. If this is a Batman story and Batman doesn't kill them, that's a moral failing for Batman.
I disagree.
I'm a
strong believer in the moral ethos, and I think it's because these are stories often for young people,
right.
and telling the line between vigilantism and full, law compliant or society compliant vigilantism and full lynch mob is the difference between the Punisher and basically most other superheroes. Right. And that's why the Punisher is the Punisher, because he crosses that line. That's the point of his character. And it's why Captain America will punch him in the face.
No, I'm not saying that doesn't have a place, but what I was really saying with the Batman comment is like, Batman should never kill anyone, but like, it's never addressed that like that actually puts people in peril. And
it gets addressed all the time. People, it's like the most common thing that gets mentioned, though.
Well, in the fandom, not in the books.
Yeah, no, it gets mentioned in the books. It gets mentioned.
I don't ever.
These days, for sure, it gets mentioned in the books.
It's all over.
I haven't read a Batman comic in.
It is all over Frank Miller's Dark Knight Returns. The whole thing of Joker when he's running into the tunnel of love with a batarang in his eye is essentially you won't kill. And I get to kill more people because of it.
Under the Red Hood brings it up too.
The whole point of that. So it's been addressed. It's not just the fandom.
But anyway, that's a like an in-story issue. I think that makes a lot of sense. But I do understand where you're coming from. I guess I just don't agree. I just think I think they do. I think the story does a great job of making these people despicable, and I think that Wolverine is going to frontier justice is not outside of his bailiwick.
Still should have had Punisher do it.
That's the thing. Frank doesn't know frontier justice. That one of the things is coming back to the discussion about Wolverine's past is it's like
Castle does know frontier justice. They have had him to go to the border and do some stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's not entirely.
Yeah.
So anyway, so on to the next one.
Sure. I think that one is mine, actually. And
Well, it's good because that brings up some of the complaints that you just had. in like the opposite, the solutions to the complaints that you just had.
I'm not saying my story is perfect in this regard, because I think he's flirting with the line in that one.
Yeah.
But I think you'd argue. I think I can make a case slightly better for this one because it's the character he gets into mortal violence with is a vampire. And the rules are different for vampires.
Well, and I mean, it's not even just that he's a vampire. It's that he's actually, I mean, like you have a life. You have a Wolverine isn't in a situation where he's defending. He's theoretically in mortal peril.
Well, if you also want to talk about, we'll get in when we get into the story, the crusade of justice in this case, right, where the person deserves it. Wolverine also witnessed something horrible to a character that was slightly humanized for us earlier in the book, like right in front of his eyes, which I think that gives a little more justification as well.
Hold on, let me pull up.
Jim Tuner comes in with the hottest take of the night.
No Wolverine story is a good Wolverine story without fire claws.
I don't think any of our stories had fire claws.
I got it. I've not bought a Wolverine comic since that happened. So
Yeah.
I would say no Wolverine story is good without Santa Claus.
Okay. Yeah.
The claws that give presents.
Alrighty. Okay, so
They're just candy canes coming out of his hands.
Merry Christmas.
Oh, curses! That deserves curses.
All right. If Mrs. H were here, that would have been the joke. Ray Cortex says, "Hey, good to see you there, Ray." All right, so
Mrs. H is here.
Oh, okay, cool.
Hey, earlier.
Oh, hey,
I didn't see you. There she is.
So I picked this one. So no offense, I haven't read a ton of Wolverine outside of like X-Men appearances. So when we did this panel, I was like, I pulled from just literally a childhood imprinted memory. Is Wolverine's favorite drink White Claws? I mean, that's fair.
No,
I think that's completely fair though to pick something from memory because it's supposed to be our favorite comic, and favorite doesn't even always have to be what we think is the best. Subjectivity.
I was gonna say I had no memory apart from like two things, which was the character Scylla, who I remember just being very bizarre, and then
she is weird looking,
and then Bloodscream, who is extremely crazy looking. And the image of Bloodscream that we'll see later, I'll definitely pull it up, it imprinted itself on my mind as a young, very young Twitless. And I was just like, wow, this is just nightmare fuel. And ended up kind of, I think impacting, because there's certain things that when you see them as a young person, they just end up like, imprinting themselves on your brain and showing up later.
It reminds me of the Illuminator comic we read with the mall and how the guy just kept getting more deranged the longer the story went on.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But this is like pure 90s. We're gonna exaggerate, like take Venom, right, for example, right, and then just like make these characters just grotesquely disjointed, and that idea is a very 90s kind of a thing. What I was pleasantly surprised because I pulled the book for those reasons. I was pleasantly surprised because this is an extremely good example of just sequential art storytelling in just, I think, a formal sense. This is a combination of Larry Hama, who's a very capable scripter, and Adam Kubert on pencils, who's a very capable penciler. And boy, does this book know how to work a spread. Look at that opening. This is just like, oh my gosh, this is just drink that in there, ladies and gentlemen. We've got, you know, the sword coming out at you as Wolverine rides his steed, his motorcycle, and he's fighting a crazy nightmare vampire. But like I said, as I continue to read just how the paneling and sequencing were done, like again on this page, this is just good stuff. This is just, you know, very effective and artistic and stylistic sequential art storytelling. I was just like really impressed by not just, I think, the quality of the writing, but just like how like the paneling was put together. It's just, this is comics, ladies and gentlemen.
And so I want to go ahead and read this on the second page, right? It's got this great opening. It's got with the thing in there with the monster and the motorcycle and it's the Logan tag on the motorcycle. And Wolverine is swinging the sword and he's thinking he's doing his narration. I've heard that before. Old Shinjin, that's his potential father-in-law, Shinjin, even wrote a haiku about it. The bright blade flashes, inscribing the final arc on all tomorrows. It actually has a haiku to open the story with.
Yep. So we've got that. The only disappointment I had, for a moment, I thought the paneling might have matched haiku style as well, and I wasn't able to see that. But I was I was like, oh, did Adam Kubert do like a 575 in terms of the panel layout? I was like, I would have been so impressed. And I don't think that's what's going on here, but like this, there were some interesting artistic things going on here. Yeah, there is a haiku in there. So the basic gist of the story is that Wolverine, this is the most un-Wolverine in some ways, in terms of his powers, because this is after Magneto ripped the skeleton off him. Yes, that's a thing that happened.
Yeah.
And so both his healing factor is not working really well, barely at all. So they nerfed that, and he doesn't have the adamantium anymore. He's down to the bone claws. He's a much more vulnerable character. And he is being hunted by Bloodscream, who is this British vampire from, you know, centuries ago, who was told by essentially a necromancer that turned him into a vampire. If you want to undo this, you need the blood of an immortal. And he's like, where am I going to find one of those? And, you know, here you go.
Well, and the crazy thing is I almost picked a comic. I think it was, this is 78. I think it was like 85 is when I almost picked too. Which is one where Wolverine takes a job in the city working as a construction worker that I almost picked, but wasn't my favorite. So
what's cool about this story is that it's Wolverine. He's still himself. He's still, you know, resourceful. He's still strong. He still has some of his mutant powers, but he's at a bit of a nadir, and he is trying to essentially avoid, while also kind of, you know, essentially tire out. He's being very strategic about leading his pursuers through the wilderness. He also, I think he kills a wolf and, like, you know, wears its skin. It gets kind of crazy.
Wild man.
Yeah, it's pretty 90s in that sense as well. But it's I don't know. It's just a treat. And then at the very end, it concludes after.
Before we get to the end, I want to spend a little bit of time talking about the lead up to these other characters.
Sure.
So we talked about Bloodscream, the British vampire who was a companion to Francis Drake. He tells his story to his traveling companion, and I can't remember her name right now. Scylla, right?
Yeah.
And they're talking about you know, their own personal frailties and weaknesses and everything on there, and so you get to see Scylla being pathetic and Bloodscream being savage, and Scylla's got a moral center that she's looking for some sort of resolution to, and you get to see that. So you're talking about the villains being humanized.
Yeah.
And I think that in the last story we talked about, that definitely is happening on here, but the nature of their humanities are different. And it really sets up a twist at the end that is just, it's really punchy. And like, I tell you what, that actually took me by surprise when I was reading it. And I don't know if we want to get into that quite yet, but
You're sure,
that
that's
was
fine.
one of the, that was one of
You
the
mean
elements.
when Bloodscream backstabs Scylla and is just like, oh hey, I'm just totally gonna just drink you dry.
Hero cattle.
Yeah, exactly.
That basically he's been dragging this woman across the Canadian frontier so that he'd have a power up before fighting Wolverine.
Yep.
Right. And it's just like that.
Yeah,
like
he's pretty evil.
Yeah, he's
And it makes you
super
feel
evil.
bad because you're like, Scylla's not a good person, but she chose not to eat the living guy.
She's humanized
she ate a
just
bird
enough.
instead.
She's humanized just enough so you feel a little bit of a twinge. You don't feel nothing when she gets
and she has a sense of desperation, right? Where she's wanting, she's suffering, she's wanting a way out from her suffering. She believes this can do it. She's there, but there is lines she doesn't want to cross on the path there.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I thought was they did that this is a really fun job at. So when Bloodscream kills her, I was just like, oh, you asshole.
Yeah, exactly.
What makes it even worse too is like he's trying to feed her earlier, and then you realize, oh, he was just trying to feed her so she would be fuller, so he could be even fuller by the time that he ate her.
Yep. This gosh, how old was I? 11? 12 when I read this? When you read things when you're 12, like they have an impact on you. Be careful of what your kids read when they're 12, because this is what I read, and that's how I am. This is why I am who I am. Not just this. Yeah, so here's the thing that really left an impression on me. This page here. What the hell is going on? Not only is it a good spread in terms of just the action shot here, although I think the opening spread at the beginning was probably better, but what they've done to Bloodscream at this point, and again, this is that sort of like Todd McFarlane, Venom kind of thing, Carnage, that just taking a character and just exaggerating the anatomy until it is purely cartoon. And that's something that with Bloodscream they and certain villains they definitely did. Venom is probably the most popular example, but he's not the only example. And with Bloodscream here, he's just like seeing this old man character who when I was younger, when I was like 11, I was didn't know how to read comics. I almost thought I couldn't tell if Bloodscream was a man or a woman. And so with the long hair, I'm like, is this an old lady? Like, what the hell? What is going on? Why is her face like 8 feet long? Like, it's pretty freaky. It's crazy.
Yeah.
So yeah, not only is he a jerk, but he transmorphs into I am a literal monster. So as Wolverine goes to swing the honor sword, which he got from Mariko in the comic that I think we'll do last, there's definitely a bit of I would almost call it medieval sensibility to this. There's even a reference, Bloodscream kind of rakes a reference to I think Wolverine essentially riding a horse essentially as the motorcycle. I think he calls it a Snickersnee or something. And I think that Snickersnee, I think that's a reference to a horse or something. But because Bloodscream is an old kind of British guy, and so a lot of the stuff he mentions is it's old British. No, he's okay. The Snickersnee is a reference to the sword. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a type of hand-to-hand fighting with pointed knives.
It's the knife. But there's this setup, and and with Wolverine riding essentially the modern incarnation of a horse while he wears the skin of a wolf and wields an ancient sword. Like I said, there's this.
With thy steed of iron and thy heathen Snickersnee.
Exactly. Yeah. There's a kind of a deeper symbolic, almost mythological reading to it. So it's the 90s comics often get just, these are shallow, stupid books that just do style over substance. What I appreciate about this and why this book is very quickly becoming one of my favorite Wolverine books, if not my favorite, definitely near the top, is because this is the best of the 90s, I think, in terms of style. but this story has substance to it, and that is, that's something that gets leveled as criticism. But there's substance here, and there's deeper meaning behind things going on. Larry Hama does a good job of. It's probably Larry Hama, but he does a good job with it. And
we got a teehee.
Oh. Uncanny X-Force final execution. Wolverine murders his own son by drowning him. Was that that was a Dakin? Is that one right?
Dakin, I think it's that, but I don't know.
Okay. I remember him from Dark Avengers. Oh, did you pull it up? All right, wait, let's.
Yeah, here, let me share my screen. Right. Present. Again for this one. There we go.
Isn't that a Mandium's candy canes? Oh my god. Oh my god.
I love it.
That's probably that might be my favorite. That's art.
Pure art.
Yeah, it's art right there.
It's a smoking pickle with candy cane claws. I'm broken.
You broke Reed. One of these days, we just need to publish a book and just kickstart it, and it's just going to be, Pickle Party.
Pickle. It's a pickle picture book.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It'll literally just be all of these, and people will buy it, and only people who watch the show will know what the hell any of these. We'll have to basically write a compendium where we basically explain all of them. So, as the Pog one was your favorite, well, they're all kind of my favorite. So.
Yeah, but this one didn't exist back when you said that. So
yeah, exactly. My favorite is probably the one that I think you did an Omega Girl one, right? That one probably default has to be my favorite. But they're all fantastic. One of these days that probably needs to get published. Jim Tuner is just trying to troll us with all of the biggest hits of Wolverine's low points.
It's not hard to find.
I think, yeah. Everyone's a pickle. Leave your self-esteem at the door.
All right. So, any other thoughts? Metal, what did you think of number 78? I talked a bunch about it.
I thought it was just a fun romp. One of the things about the art too that it really stood out was the coloring. Even though obviously it was slightly distorted, the version we read because of the scan, right. you could still tell. A lot of times when you have that type of like inking, the color kind of like just washes out or just doesn't do it justice. And whoever colored this did a great job of actually pulling out the strengths of the ink while keeping everything vibrant. And it kind of had that dark, almost like midnight myth feel to it the entire way through, even during the daylight section with him in the woods. And I thought that was really good. It had a very solid tone throughout, and I just enjoyed it. It was a fun romp.
Yeah. Steve Buccoletto was the colorist.
Oh, nice.
I don't know who that is, but
yeah, I think he did the coloring. He was involved in Generation X too. I can't remember if he was the pencil artist or what, but I think I might be remembering wrong. The other thing I really loved about it is that like it's got all of this great narrative buildup, and it's got this end that totally fits and makes sense after this. Because the penultimate moment is greater than the ultimate moment in this thing. It's just got this thing, and then it's got this ending, and then where it's just got this great joke at the end of it. Yeah. where I don't want to spoil it there, but Wolverine says, "Why such a surprised look on your mug, bub? Did you think you'd live forever?"
Yeah.
Which, in a weird way, I think he kind of got what he wanted, because the whole point was that he wanted to undo the vampirism, and it's like, well,
there you go.
There you go.
Well, this is fun too. Is like you knew how it was going to end precisely. You didn't know about the cattle part. That was the cool twist. But like you knew that he was going to die to the sword because he said that it was forged from meteorite metal, and then he also said that you could only be killed by otherworldly metal in his backstory. He's like, oh, he's going to be cut by the sword and die.
Yeah. I mean, it's woven in a way that like it's self-referential.
It's a good setup,
and it was a great setup. It was a great setup, and one of the great things is I think how they even tell the story of the forging of the sword, and so it does I think a really good job of playing into Wolverine's overall mythos, especially in this context of him having kind of refinding a center after the whole Magneto incident.
Yeah, it was like Twitless. This story is almost structured like a mythical story because a lot of times when you're reading a myth, you'll be following the hero, but then it'll cut as like, well, and this is the thing that the gods did that set up to this moment, or this is where this holy artifact came from, and then it comes back to the climax. So it's got that classical myth structure to the entire issue.
Surprise! Larry Hama's a good writer.
Yeah.
What else can we say?
Yeah. Well, we can say on to the next comic.
Yeah. So what else did we have here?
The next one would be the X-Men issue that Barry was gonna do.
Yeah. Hold on.
Yeah, I do remember Romulus and the Lupine Mutants. Very vaguely, do I remember them.
All right. So this is from
Wolverine,
someone who's
the end.
This one was Barry's, who he's not here to explain why he picked it, so we can just talk about it, I guess.
We could just guess.
We could guess, knowing Barry, why did he pick this?
Yes, Neostar, that Larry Hama, yeah.
Yeah, he's just a good writer overall. Like, you'll probably pick any random story by him, it's probably good.
Give me a second. I'm gonna pull up some images, but it's gonna take me a minute. There's 1,000 X-Men books.
It's number 5.
No, I mean there's 1,000 X-Men series. So when I have sorting through stuff, it's like
I see.
Yeah. Star Trek and X-Men. Yeah. It's like they've done so much with. You know what's really funny is when you dig into the comic book history and right around the time Chris Claremont got it, they were like, "Yeah, this series on this way out. It's kind of trash. No one wants it. Who can we give this to? What new kid can we give this to?" Chris Claremont's like, "I'll do it," and then it's like 17 years later, and then it became like one of their most productive franchises of all time.
The story.
Yeah. But not just the fact that he made the story, but they made it into such a moneymaker. It went from their least selling, we're about to cancel this, put one of the interns on it, and then it became like, so Marvel's the X-Men now.
I think at one point in time you have like 50 different X-Men related comics running at the same time.
I mean, it's like I said, it's absolutely bonkers. And it just tells you like the power of a good creative team. Let's see here. It's issue 5, right? Okay, here we go.
See, a better comic these days would just be somebody chronicling the history of Marvel Comics because it's got all the twists built into it.
Sean Howe did that, yeah, with his history of Marvel.
Oh, I need to read that then.
Taylor says they even rebooted the numbers at one point. Yeah,
just once. They only did that one time. Yeah.
Just the one time.
Only the one time.
One time. Yeah, they've only ever done that one time.
And no one's ever tried doing that since then.
Oh yeah, Captain Cummings brings up such an excellent point of how things change, right? Because Jim Shooter does some interviews when he talks about Secret Wars, and he talks about the fact that no one knew who Iron Man was back when he was editor-in-chief. And that's us. I remember when I told some students about that, and I was like, yeah, there was a time where, in the 90s where no one knew who Iron Man was, and my students just kind of gave me this blank look, and they're like, what? Because he became Robert Downey Jr. comes along, and suddenly Iron Man, in our current zeitgeist, the Avengers are way bigger than the X-Men are. But in the 90s, the opposite was true. The X-Men were like
even look at the movies that came out.
There was an Iron Man cartoon series in the 90s.
Yeah,
I did. I actually liked it.
That wasn't terrible.
Yeah, but most people had that just washed over people. Like no one had any idea. So I got some images pulled up for issue number 5 here.
Yeah, I got it. You got it.
Okay,
I got it.
I like the Iron Man opening more than the show, though. Like him silhouette on the forge was just great.
Yeah, that was fun.
So
anyway, so this was Barry's comic, and
this one was a mess.
Yes, it was.
It was an enjoyable mess. I kind of liked.
I enjoyed it, but it was a mess.
I agree. This book has got because this is very early into Jim Lee's run on things, and
yeah, it's Jim Lee's story, and John Byrne did the script.
Okay.
I think the biggest problem this book had, as far as being an enclosed book, was that it was not an enclosed book, right? It very heavily dependent upon the stuff going on in the book before it and over in Uncanny, and so it's if you're not reading all of it, it's hard to get a bead on the exact moments on it.
And only half this book is actually a Wolverine
Jim
story.
Tuner says, looking at that cover just makes me tired. So that was one of the things that we'd have a whole conversation about, how the 90s Image crowd, and some of them are still making comics to this day, they sure do love to put a lot of lines on the page. Oddly enough, so did Jack Kirby. And your brain and your eyes just get tired when there's just that many lines to process. One thing that's interesting here was there's a good documentary I recommend called Chris Claremont's X-Men, and he kind of talks about the fact that what's going on here historically is the fact that the new kids on the block grew up reading Chris Claremont's run, and they were young men mostly, and they didn't want to see the family oriented soap opera that Chris Claremont was continuing to weave, because Chris Claremont essentially treated these characters like family. And so Cyclops,
they all had family roles and stuff like that they all filled in the middle. That's one of the things I like about old X-Men. Because they were like that.
And so the thing is, and so I'm not criticizing. I'm not gonna oversell or overhype Chris Claremont. And I'm not here to talk down to Jim Lee, but there's a very interesting moment in that documentary where Chris Claremont kind of shrugs his shoulders, and you could tell that at the time he was a lot more upset about it, because even it alludes to how upset he was when he got kind of shuffled off after 17 years of basically treating these characters like they were an extension of him and his family of his own creation. But he kind of shrugs his shoulders, and he's just like, well, the new generation came in and they just really weren't interested in what I was doing. And they cut to I think it's Rob Liefeld, and he says, I didn't want to read stories about Storm going to the mall, and just, eating dinner with, he's like, I wanted to see, action and blowing up stuff. And, and honestly, I'm not criticizing either of these men, because what you have is it was a passing of the torch. You had an older man who was much more interested in telling different types of stories, and people getting older and moving on. And you had the young guy full of testosterone and hormones. And he's like, no, I want Psylocke in a bikini. And so that's what we get on page 3.
Yeah.
It's 2.
Well, it's a double page spread, right? So it's
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, it's page 3. You're right.
Well, see, because that's
I guess it gets
Wolverine,
2, 3. She's in the bottom left hand quadrant. 2, 3. Yeah.
Because Wolverine was basically your drunk hermit uncle that nobody got along with for too long. So he lived out in the woods, and you saw him once every couple months or so, and he brought back a cooler of elk meat. And it's like, hey, I'm here. Do you have beer?
Yeah, your weird Canadian uncle.
Yeah.
So,
with his whole cooler filled with elk meat.
So the pitch for this story is essentially the X-Men get sucked into the Weapon X program kind of drama, which, you know, if you've watched the movies, if you know a lot about Wolverine, a lot of I swear this will be my second to last tangent of the evening. But I do have to say, one of the things that makes superhero comics superior to superhero appearances in other medium, especially film and video games, is the fact that there's film and video games and cartoons tend to tell the same half dozen to a dozen stories out of the overall corpus of literature for superheroes. And what's so important about reading the superhero corpus is the fact that you read hundreds. So this is the Weapon X storyline that you have probably seen. You know, it's a different version of it, but it's the Weapon X storyline, and we've seen that one done probably to death at this point. But this is this the origin for the Weapon X stuff? I think this is when that did they kick it off this year?
This is the like the other side. I mean, this is like the fallouts from Weapon X stuff. They're like they're like other people that were involved in it, but not the.
Oh, that's right. It's the Fenris twins. Yeah, they're doing stuff with it. Well, I know Omega Red's Weapon X. So
yeah, I mean, he was like one of the cases, and it goes back to the Black Ops days. They were one of the. It alludes to it. That one of the missions that the Team X, or whatever, I can't remember the thing, but they were out to like capture this dude, and then this back 30 years before all this stuff went down, and then here we have a situation where Wolverine is reliving some of those memories while he's having his mind screwed with by these are the guys because they're trying to pull out from his memory a specific doodad thingamy. Call it.
I will say that I think that between the two,
MacGuffin.
Yeah.
I think MacGuffin.
It's because Jim Tuner's bringing up the fact that X-Men got to a point in that era where the stories were not readable as stories; they were just art that happened. I think that's why the Larry Hama and Adam Kubert one is really good, because you're getting the style, but you're also getting substance. And I think this book is just, there's a lot going on in it. That's probably what's leading to some of those issues, because there's so many characters. There's a scene that's basically just a giant conference table meeting where even more characters. This is definitely the point in the X-Men where you needed to be a reader of X-Men to know what was going on. This is not like, oh, I can jump on here. It's like you're gonna get.
Well, and it's also a time jump. So that's one of the things about that I found really frustrating about this story is that it fell into the very trendy mid 90s storytelling device of nonlinear storytelling, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't mind nonlinear storytelling if it's done. In fact, I'm in the middle of one right now on Forces. But the problem with being nonlinear and something like that is you've got to really be able to lay out why you're telling it out of sequence. And that's one of the problems on here is that the jump is so jarring that when the timelines connect again, you then can kind of end up being really at least I was really confused when they converged again on here.
All right, trying to do a couple things at once here.
I like that question. Was Jubilee a vampire single mother at this point?
Henry's just rubbing our noses in all of the low points. Today. Next, he's going to bring up X Factor. So, which I like.
Honestly, the only redeeming point of this page right here is the fact that I got to see two of the finer looking women in nice low cut dresses. It's like the only thing I like about this page. There's too many people on the page, too much reading.
I don't know. This doesn't bother me too much because at least it's only 2 pages. If this were done in current year, this would be like the whole issue. The whole issue would just
Yeah,
be like
yeah.
this one conversation. Tune in next time, and maybe you'll get an action scene.
It'd
So
be
Devin's got a great
page
comment on this
spreads back,
page.
back to back with nothing but conversation.
Seven's got a great comment here. I had no idea what the hell was going on when I read this as a teenager, but I loved it so much and was so intrigued that I read it countless times and scrambled to find other issues for context.
Okay, so this is an excellent point. So as much as that this thing is messy, there is that reaction. Seven's reaction is not he's not alone in that.
Mm-mm.
People picked this up and then went I mean, X-Men #1 was oversold, but this was a popular series and people did get on board with.
Well, and that's one thing Barry and I
were.
That's one thing Barry and I were talking about behind the scenes when I invited him on, and he picked this. He said he was going to have a hard time picking an issue because it's all part of one piece.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you get an issue with all of that? And I now looking at this, and at the time I was like, yeah, I can kind of see what you mean. And then I read this, and I was like, oh, okay, that's what he was talking. And that's when I first led into this. We're talking about just the level of context, and there's a couple. If you take a look at the bottom here of that, if you go back up that 2-page spread, in the bottom corner, there's a little note that says, yep, all this takes place before Uncanny X-Men, blah, blah, blah. So you've got your little note from the editor about where this fits in the continuity timeline. Yeah. So suddenly you're like, oh, okay.
I know where this is.
Yeah, like Seven says, you got. I mean, man, what's going on? I'm so interested in everything happening, and I need more. I got to go to the corner store and buy more.
So I'm gonna beat. Neo Star just brought up something, and I get to finally beat Jim Tooner to the punch. Is it just me, or has the mutants become oversaturated? Aren't there over several dozen known mutants at this point? And so that's where I can say, so one of the other things we can rub people's nose in is the fact that they tried to solve that very problem with House of M. Remember that, Jim?
Yeah, I was just complaining about it on Rick's show last night.
Yeah. Well, and one of the things about the number of mutants is in universe it kind of
I broke Jim. I broke Jim Tooner.
Yeah,
sorry.
in the continuity, it would make sense that there were hundreds and hundreds of mutants, but not all of them have interesting stories. And we have a situation, I think, with Team Red or Team Blue, Team Yellow, where there were just so many characters. And here they decided, well, let's go ahead and talk to all of them at once. It's a big sit down within like 20 characters on the screen. And some of them are going to the Hellfire Gala. Oh joy.
You gotta talk to the White Queen. Yeah, so this story, I think the high marks for it, well, obviously I always like I'm a sucker for Scott and Jean, so anytime that they're in love, I'm happy. The other high mark here is Wolverine versus Omega Red. I like Omega Red because he's a villain who they usually posit him as a real threat, someone who could like take out Wolverine, and that's kind of nice because there are certain matchups where you're just like not really worried about Wolverine at this point, especially as he starts to power scale. And Omega Red's one of the characters where you're like, oh, this guy could really mess him up. So I do like him as a villain. He's also got these weird tentacle arm things. The 90s. I don't know what to say there.
It just looks like a character that was designed to sell action figures.
I think my neighbor had that toy.
I definitely think he was designed to sell action figures. I also think it's one of the interesting things about it is they do one of the fun things about Omega Red and the framing of the story. One of the things I appreciated about this issue was tying it back to that Weapon X Black Ops kind of past.
Yeah.
And I really found the idea that Wolverine had been a soldier, Wolverine in like World War II, World War I, that Wolverine had been in the Cold War, had been fighting commies. I was always intrigued about that aspect, and I thought that was really cool. And so I appreciated that being that Omega Red also has a connection to that same Cold War past. But
Seven says Jim Lee said he was designed with heavy metal in mind. That makes sense.
yeah,
I can see that. Yeah. It was saying that it was designed to sell an action figure. There's no criticism towards it.
No, yeah, exactly. There's lots of that's totally fine. Taylor says you're not a sucker for Scott and Jean. You just really hate Emma Frost. That is not true. Jean Grey has been. I think she was one of my first comic book crushes. I don't know, just she was cool. I really dug the whole Phoenix aspect when I was.
Well, they were kind of like mom and dad, in a way, like of the team.
Yeah, I will say. Well, I guess we can get to that later, but or in a moment. But so yeah, this is the most Jim Lee thing that Jim Lee'd. So what else can I say?
I think that's pretty fair.
Okay.
The other thing, one slight complaint on the thing too. The end of the story, the issue, it just kind of goes off the rails. When
You just more. By the way, more characters.
Yeah. And when they introduce Maverick, that whole segment about how he escapes and what he's going and what's in the canister, and
that's right. Then Longshot, and then
then
Mojo,
I was just like
everybody.
And so then they, the flashback and the knot, and I'm sitting here trying to figure out, okay, what is a dream? What is an illusion? Because what is going on in the mind control device? Is all of this just? I mean, is Arcade? Are you there, Arcade?
It's just set up for next episode. That's all.
I'm pretty sure Arcade gets replaced by Mojo in terms of.
Oh yeah, that's absolutely true.
He takes that role because he's edgier and way more grotesquely portrayed. So.
Yeah, that's definitely a factor, and that actually this whole ties into the Mojo World thing at the end of this one.
Do you remember when you had to hit reset on your Sega Genesis to beat Mojo's Crunch?
No, I didn't have that game. I didn't have a Genesis. It
was one of the few meta things that the Sega Genesis had, and in order to pass Mojo's level, and you went into his digital world, and a prompt comes up that says you have to resets the bomb to prevent the bomb from going off, and there's nothing you can do to reset the bomb. And so little kid me was just like, okay, what do I do? And then you die, and then you literally have to hit the reset button on the console, and then you get to go to the final level after that. It's really
there was
weird.
Something similar to that on the SNES Batman game as well.
Oh really?
Yeah.
But
you would see it pop up from time to time, but yeah, that was one of the quirkier things about that game.
Yeah.
So Neil, the answer isn't to start culling numbers, is to just let people get old. That's the answer. Just if you let characters
let
get
time
old.
progress.
I'm okay with not letting time progress. I'm fine with that. I will say that you can just have characters just go on a farm somewhere and just not deal with them. You don't have to have all of them in front of you at the same time.
What's that Lyman or whatever it is in Garfield, John's roommate?
Yeah.
He just stops showing up.
Yeah.
He's there, and all of a sudden he's just not. No explanation. No reason to explain it.
I'm fine with them just being like, oh, that character is just no longer a member of the X-Men. They're just, in the United States somewhere, doing something with their agency. It's not like all the X-Men would always stay with the paramilitary team.
Yeah, one of them became a model or something. Doesn't matter. Whatever.
Dazzler, yeah.
Dazzler.
But Mrs. H says Hotel Dusk. So now we're gonna be talking about video games now. I've opened a door here. We should probably close. Hotel Dusk on the DS has this thing where you had to close the DS to dump a puzzle to see the clue on the back. Okay, well, Star Tropics, you had to dip the video game manual in water to see the secret message to get the frequency so that you could, contact a character in game.
Yeah, and now you just have to look it up online because you can't get a manual anywhere.
Yeah. But yes, Taylor. Yes, Taylor is correct. This is part of the problem with the stories that are designed to never end. It's partly it puts us in this weird place because we love them for it. We also hate them for it. It's just it is the beast that it is. Do we have any for final thoughts for X-Men number 5?
I will say, if you like stories that have an end, head over to idealcomics.gumroad.com and buy yourself a copy of Zing 1. We've got some zingers of enders in that one.
Zingers, I get it.
I think I would just like this story better if it was 2 stories. Like if it was 2 different comics. I think I would like it
or
better.
I actually agree.
Or four, yeah. At least 2. The bare minimum 2.
In the chat, this is great. You play the DS, Mrs. H. I play the DS. That's awesome. Okay. Next one, and our final Wolverine comic picked by somebody who's not here.
Yeah.
Again.
And this is a good one.
It is.
I'm glad we're ending on this one. This is definitely a good one. I think it's a contender for best one of the night, if I'm being honest. A second. I think it's here we go. Okay, yeah.
Excuse me. Pardon
So
me.
back when you got advertisements for Cracker Jacks in your comics.
Oh, this one had a lot of ads in it.
Yeah.
And I didn't mind at all.
Very, very well-known cover. And done by 2 other very well-known, I would say, comic masters. I'm not saying that they're beyond critique or criticism, but very, very well recognized for being masters of the form. Chris Claremont and Frank Miller. So definitely got some powerful things going on here. You've got, Chris Claremont's ability to flesh out character and scene, and even going too far in places, probably putting too many words on the page, as his is wont. And then pair that with what I would say is Frank Miller's geometric art style. Is that fair to say? I think he gets more and more geometric as he goes. Also, Dungeons and Dragons ad.
Yeah, I liked that. I think, because he was basically just trying to draw human form, or like forms as they were at first. And the further he goes along, the more and more he starts leaning into his style, and it just gets more and more polygons.
Yeah, like by the time he gets into like Dark Knight Strikes Back and so on, and some elements of Sin City, like characters' faces are, there's a little bit of that here towards the end of the miniseries, but like characters' faces just become squares, very heavily geometric. But here he's being more restrained, I think, in that. His art style is a little bit more traditional, but there's still, I think, again, you see some of these close-ups. He's still, I think, doing a lot with some, you can definitely see the shape that Miller is working with when he is portraying some of these faces. So like I said, the best way I can express it is, like I said, there's this geometric quality that he brings to human figures, which is, it's odd, but it's very recognizable quality of his writing. Also, there's spousal abuse in this story, so that's probably a low mark. We'll skip past that. The basic pitch here is the fact that
he's a bad guy.
I know.
Yeah.
I
think it's treated well overall.
Yeah, I mean, the entire deal is to juxtapose the Wolverine from this other guy. So
yes, so the basic pitch here is that Wolverine is going back to kind of, try to reconnect with his lost love, Mariko, here, but he finds out that she's married. And she's been married off by her powerful father, and Wolverine's not going to take that sitting down. So Wolverine goes and tries to get to the bottom of this, and ends up in a fight with Shinjin, which is Mariko's father, in a very in a good setup to what the miniseries will be. And like I said before, you get, Claremont, I think, at his best. I think you get Frank Miller in some ways. I don't know if this is Frank Miller at his best, but it's definitely very solid. And like I said, it definitely has the earmarks of Miller, like with what he's doing. Definitely some pages that because Miller is clearly heavily influenced by manga. I think it's Lone Wolf and Cub in particular that he's influenced by, and so I think that in the sword fight you get here, I think you're seeing some of the influences that he's bringing to bear there. His love of Japanese culture. I'm actually I was not able to look this up, but I get the feeling. I mean, Chris Claremont did his homework, but I also get the feeling that Frank Miller may have been passing notes to Chris to be like, because there's as the miniseries continues, there's a lot of just like factoids about Japan, and I'm like, I feel like that's Frank Miller, because Frank Miller is definitely the weeb. We all know Miller's a weeb. So this is where where's Marm? Marm, you can ask your weird questions now about what was it? Ask Twitless if he saw the Wolverine as white romanticization of the other in Japan. Oh, if I saw that take. Oh no, I did not see that take. I'm glad I didn't. Because that's definitely that would be the concept at play here, for people who would who read post-colonial theory into things. Not my favorite theory, but this would definitely be the white other, because he speaks
kind of
perfect.
like Iron Fist into China, like in a similar respect.
Yeah, he speaks perfect Japanese. He's more Japanese than he's more Japanese than Shinjin is, and so that's definitely a play here if you want to go that route. Thanks, Marm.
Yeah, well, and I mean, and part of the deal, they don't. I don't know that they address it. I don't know if it's addressed in this story or not, but part of Logan's like familiarity with that, I don't think it's written. I don't know, it's probably written in later that he spent a significant amount of time in Japan after World War II before his most recent mind wipe. So there's some of that stuff that's he does remember bits and pieces of things from between things, where he doesn't remember all that stuff. But anyhow, so for him to speak perfect Japanese is, he has decades of experience.
I mean, like if you go with the fact like, oh, we don't know how old this guy is, which I think Chris Claremont was, at the time kind of dealing with. We have this character who's mysterious. How old is he? He could be any mysterious. I think Claremont kind of says he's this kind of cipher, and we can do a lot of storytelling and hinting around things with that. It definitely fits that he could have, there's nothing outside the story that prevents Wolverine from being this type of character who's been all over the world, who's lived a long time and has a mysterious past, and who could integrate into cultures from being long lived. But there is a reading you could take that Marm's essentially, I think, mentioning here, which, like I said, I'm not a huge fan of, but whatever. This
Which
story,
I don't even think with notes, right? To say Miller was the one who helped influence a lot of this stuff by sending notes. I don't even think that's the reading he would take either as the writer, because he's kind of just like not just a weeb, but he's one of those like men of history. You see a lot of the other stuff that he writes. He likes including myths and tales from history and stuff into what he does. I think he would just be seeing Wolverine as a man of history that is still around for some reason.
Well, it's important, I think, to remember, I think he does Ronin like 1 year after this. So part of me also thinks this was a bit of a dry run for Ronin.
Yeah, probably.
And because like there's a lot of common elements, I think, between the two. Seven says, what if he was a leper healed by Jesus, which activated his mutant healing factor?
That would be an amazing story. We should give Rick that idea for his comics. Maybe he can do something with it.
That's amazing.
Captain Cummings says, I went to the comic book shop today. Yes, I just saw that. Saw that on Wikipedia. Miller is now doing Ronin 2. I've noticed that a lot of creators who I feel like you George Lucas it a lot of times. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, I can tell more stories with this. I'm going to do the Star Wars prequels. And it's like, it's kind of a disaster. And there are a lot of people who say, I think Dark Knight Strikes Back and those future stories just become more and more disastrous, whereas The Dark Knight Returns is kind of perfect for what it is. So I don't know if Miller's is good at round 2.
Yeah, well, I would have to say already another more recent one, Xerxes, was not very good.
Yeah. He did. He just equals 300 too. No, Cummings, we're not going to start. Chat just wants to start stuff today.
Right, bro.
Let's just open all of the cans of worms, all of them. So where's Matt C? Matt C would join me in defending George Lucas's honor.
Well, there's not really any honor to have. He accidentally stumbled into directing one half decent picture.
That's overreaching. I'm not.
No. It's
I'm not
he's directed 3, which one I have is THX 1138. I never saw. American Graffiti isn't well directed, and Star Wars is only well directed because he is ripping off Kurosawa.
Doesn't matter.
Every shot. It
doesn't matter. If you copy somebody else,
right? That's fine. But I'm saying those are the only pictures he's directed that are any good. I thought he did the one.
Wait, he did Indy.
No, Spielberg did Indy.
Yeah.
Well,
he was more of a writer on it.
And even then,
the
only reason Indiana Jones is any good is because Spielberg wouldn't let Lucas do what Lucas wanted to do with it.
I feel like that's still an overreach. I am not a George Lucas.
Well, there was kind of a tug of war because Lucas also didn't want to do certain things that Spielberg wanted to do, which is also how we ended up getting Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which was more Spielberg than it was Lucas.
Oh, it was just garbage.
What I'm trying anyway. Anyway,
completely off topic.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, the whole point is like Chad's just trying to take us all the which ways. So the point I'm trying to make, we were talking about Ronin, which is also not entirely on topic either. But I don't know if Miller's is good at his follow-ups. So I'm like, Ronin 2, I'm like, Ronin 1 had a perfectly nice, ambiguous ending.
Yeah. I haven't
why would
Ronin
you need
yet? So
why would you need to do more with that?
That's Ronin is on my list of to read list. I haven't gotten to that one yet.
It's
but I would say that, like, from what I have heard, I would be really interested to compare what he would do with Ronin compared to what he did with Sin City, and how that shakes out. But
Ronin's a hard book for me to judge. But I will say that it's very important because it's essentially what Tartarovsky, whatever his name is, ripped off, plagiarized for Samurai Jack. So if anyone's familiar with Samurai Jack, you like Samurai Jack, you can thank Frank Miller for that, because it's like,
well, I like Ronin, and that's probably why I liked Samurai Jack when I saw it too.
So there's actually a really interesting, on the side note. Captain Cummings says, for some reason I liked Crystal Skull originally, then I found out the internet hated it, so I watched it again. It's not a good indie movie, but it's all right. That is actually the exact thing I feel about the Last Jedi. If it wasn't supposed to be a Star Wars picture, it wouldn't be terrible. There's definitely some. Rian Johnson has skill as a director. I just really didn't like that it was a Star Wars picture. Whereas J.J. Abrams' Spaceballs 2,
I haven't watched
money,
I have not watched any of those. I refuse to give a dime to that enterprise.
So I wasn't gonna watch that J.J. Abrams Spaceballs 2, but I heard in a YouTube review when I was driving around Nebraska one time that was so funny that I realized that he accidentally made a comedy, and so I picked it up for $5. I picked it up for $5 on Black Friday and watched it back to back with the original Mel Brooks Spaceballs, and I realized that it's not only a decent sequel to Spaceballs, but it's hilarious.
If you've seen a sequel to Spaceballs,
It also rips off like a lot of the plot points from Spaceballs.
Oh,
as well.
that's
Like at one
funny.
point, they're literally running out of gas.
Yeah, well, that's why that's one of the things I was like.
We're here to talk about Wolverine. We're here to talk about Wolverine. I got to bring us back to Wolverine. It's going to be a Last Jedi discussion.
Okay,
I can't stand
so here we go. We'll wrap it up for Wolverine. Twitless, what was your favorite Wolverine comic we read this week?
Well, okay. Before we get to that, I want to get some concluding thoughts on this story because like you guys haven't commented as much on the art and the storytelling yet. So like,
but I think
what
there's
did you
less
think
contentious about this story as part of why.
Oh, okay, because it's just a good one.
I think it's really solid. It leaves.
It does so Wolverine walks into the bar bit better.
It's different. The contexts are so different.
That's fair.
You know, because I agree with you. Okay, see, part of our contention with the deal is that the Wolverine walks into a bar bit and knocks this dude out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, leaves him to life. But his crime was, not doing right by a bear. Whereas
that also led to the deaths of several people as well.
It did.
Fair point.
It did.
Fair point.
It did, but it wasn't.
Including, I believe, a mother as well. So if we're going by the morality,
No, I would say that, but negligence is different than intentional malice, and I think that's a different moral bar there.
There's more.
I will say though, it's a lot quicker. They get to the point.
Yes,
It's right to the point.
It's way more Wolverine-like in many ways. Like the Wolverine isn't really the whole "I'm gonna sit here and let it build up" kind of guy. He's kind of like, I'm gonna go in and do the thing that I came here to do.
Mm. Yeah.
Captain Cummings, Phil, you troll. Why did Wolverine Origins include a fight with Deadpool? That's not Deadpool. He's trying to keep us off track. Don't think I don't see what you're doing there.
There you go. But yeah, so I do think in terms of this though, it gets the point, and it's establishing an important aspect about Wolverine, sense of justice, sense of propriety, and sense of even mercy with all of that, which I think is important for him dealing with this concept of honor and justice as opposed in over in Japan. So I think that's
I feel like this story does a good job walking the line because in this miniseries he does kill I think a couple of people. I think he takes out a couple of hand ninjas. He leaves a couple of them alive. I think he kills a couple and they did do the disintegrate thing. And then he does end up slaying the big bad. But that's a pointed moment. That was like I am going to kill this guy. That's a decision I'm making, and it's going to have repercussions. And so it's treated with the weight that I think does justice to Wolverine's trajectory of a character of not being a man of violence.
Yeah.
Or trying to become less of a man of
trying to be less of an animal too, right?
Yes,
like there's the fight with the Boken, and he tosses aside to pull. He get mad and he pulls out his claws, but then he still doesn't even try to kill him. It's like, I'm fighting with my claws. I'm not at my best because I just recovered from like being poisoned or whatever, but like I'm still not trying to kill the guy in this fight. I'm more of an animal than a man, so I'm fighting with my claws. Like he's fighting against his instincts in a way.
Yeah.
And it adds some weight to the morality, like why his morality matters, because he is vulnerable. Like, he can die in this story, and he still chooses not to like kill people for his own survival or anything like that.
Yeah. So like this is why I think this is such a good story, because it's handling these elements really well while still putting the character on this road to a kind of redemption, I think. And where the miniseries ends, it's a kind of a payoff for that, but a complicated one. Because he doesn't just go, I'm never going to kill someone ever again. He's not exactly on that road, but he's on this road to becoming more of a man, I think, of peace than a man of violence. And I think that's the road that Claremont, I think, maybe saw the character on. That's why, seeing that later story in like 2000 and be like, oh, well, we're here again. And not only are we here, we're at Punisher level. That's why that's a hard one for me to swallow. So maybe it's less about the story itself and more about the story in context with the other ones that make that one harder for me. So, and that's, to each his own, I guess there, but, Neostar's still going on about Ryan Johnson. we made
we're
this,
not.
We made this into a look what you've done. Hold on. Okay. But I think we can probably put a pin in it there, unless chat had anything else they wanted to add. Captain Cummings wants to troll us some more, or Jim.
Could be. You never know.
Jim's gonna troll us with another, low point in the Marvel. So here's the thing: Jim's bringing
Chuck
all
Austin's entire run, and we can just say that.
Not all of it. Maybe just most of it, like 90%.
Okay, you want to say Chuck Austin may have written a decent conversation in the middle of all of that? Sure. Everything that happened was terrible. Anyhow, well, thank you for saying thanks, Ray. I appreciate that.
I was gonna say, like, the recent stuff they did with they're doing with the X-Men now. That's the real cringe. Where you have
I don't think it's anyway.
No, it's worse. It's worse.
Yeah.
They're what is it?
I don't think that you can make it less cringe for Angel to have a romantic relationship with Husk.
You can. It's close. It's close. But cosmic condoms being referenced by Boom Boom as she flushes a Boom Boom down the toilet it edges it out. It edges it out.
That beats bigotry and mustard.
So
that's basically the same thing. Okay.
Yeah. I would say, like, as we wrap up and talk about everything, the closing thoughts, let's ask the audience what was their favorite story of the ones that we covered that they saw, and maybe they can get those comments in while we're talking.
And we will have the issue numbers in the description after we wrap, probably. But
yeah, you can just give us vague descriptions.
I would recommend reading all of these. I think the miniseries are really good because you don't have to get a lot of the other context. So the Frank Miller, Chris Claremont miniseries, 4 issues, you get a completed story. It connects to the broader world, but you can just read it from beginning to finish. You can do Wolverine and Gambit, Victims, again, miniseries, beginning to end. The other stories are more interspersed in either Wolverine or the X-Men line, so they're a little harder to kind of like. They're still good stories. Go ahead and read them, but they're more connected. Although yours, Reese, was pretty standalone.
Very standalone. Yep.
So
that's specifically why I picked it.
That's fair.
And I remembered it. I remembered the story really well. So because I didn't really get into reading Wolverine until I was already grown up.
Yep, but I think I'd recommend all of these. Some more than others, but I think they all. There was nothing I was like, oh gosh.
Yeah. I mean, we very easily could have picked some pretty groan-inducing Wolverine books. There's a lot of them out there.
The one where Wolverine converts to Catholicism. That's the one I wanted. Okay.
We have to do a stream just on why Catholicism.
Oh, it's simple.
I know, but still.
It doesn't even take a stream.
It still would be an interesting idea to discuss.
Okay.
And we can make a party out of it. We could bring up a whole bunch of issues about characters converting to Catholicism and stuff like that. It could be fun.
Yeah. We need to get some genuine. Nearly need to get some Catholics on board. But, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to call it a night. We're at 2 hours and 8 minutes.
Yep.
Check out everybody's comics. Go buy comics. Do you have any new Omega Girl ready to go?
Let me just issue 2.
You've got number 2 that's for sale right now.
Yeah.
Over on Indie Planet. people go check out.
Issue 3 is at Indie Planet. As soon as they list it, it'll be available. So it's
Okay.
yeah,
Awesome.
yeah. Issue 3 is there.
Good, good.
Yeah.
Issue
Which I think
3.
I believe I sent you issue 3 as well. Did I not?
Mm-mm.
I thought I sent you that one. Okay.
Mm-mm.
That's
I think so.
things ramp up. Issue 3, which is at the printer right now, and as soon as they list it, it'll be available to everybody. That one's going to be really good. I think things pick up at issue 3. Issue 3 and 4, I'm very proud of. They're all good, but issue 3 and 4, I think people are really going to like. So stay tuned to that.
Yeah. Sounds fun. Forces is ongoing. I'm still working on the projects. I will be hopefully in the next week. I'll be dropping a mini comic on our Global Comics page as well. You can look up Ideal Comics on Global Comics and get a bunch of mini comics. Some are free, some are there for a marginal fee. But we'll be dropping a free one here, telling a story from the 1970s.
Alrighty.
So, yeah, that's the story there. How about you, Metal? What have you been working on these days?
Well, I'm wrapping up a couple of gigs from the beginning of the year. So I'm finally going to get back to like drawing and inking some pages. But on the website, I went through with what I said. I added a letters section. So if anybody has read any X Dynamis Chaos story or wants to write any letter to the editor, if it's 500 words or more, I will publish them on Mondays anytime there's new ones. So you can read the letter section. And I'm slowly adding a want ads section to the back of the site too for comics that I would like to get done. And I'm willing to work with other like artists on. We can discuss rates or royalties or whatever system we want to work on. I just don't have the time to draw myself because I'm already in deep with 3 comics.
Cool. There you go. And his website is in his little thingamy there. So
yeah, I'll drop it again in the chat too.
Yep. So anyway, we will call that there. Everybody, next week we are talking about comic strips as a form within the greater realm of comics. And Twitless will try to convince us that Pogo is the quintessential comic strip.
Probably, yeah. I'll probably settle on that one.
And I don't know what if I have an opinion on Pogo. Let's see. But anyway,
Pogo, Calvin and Hobbes, and then maybe Little Nemo and Slumberland.
Yeah, Little Nemo.
I do love at least 2
I'm
other
a
things.
big fan of Terry and the Pirates. I got to be honest.
I don't have a lot of experience with Pogo. I'll probably like Pogo, but the other 2 you mentioned, I have a lot of love for.
Yeah. Anyway, we will be catching you all next week, and until then, keep reading comics.
Reading our comics,
Especially our
exactly. For sure.
Okay.
A lot of
Give
our
us
comics are
news.
free. What are you thinking, guys?
Yeah,
Come
exactly.
on. Come on. Later.